My name is Vrethok, Senior Analyst of the Galactic Convergence Intelligence Bureau, and I am writing this account because someone has to. My superiors certainly will not. They are still sitting in their chairs, staring at the wall, occasionally making a sound that our medical staff describes as involuntary emotional processing. In simpler terms, they are rocking back and forth, whimpering softly. I do not blame them. It began, as most catastrophic mistakes do, with supreme confidence. The Galactic Convergence had monitored the humans of planet Dara 3, which they call Earth, for approximately 40 of their years. 40 years. We watched. We catalogued. We produced 17,000 reports. We held 962 committee meetings. And at the end of all that watching, all that cataloging, all that meeting, our Grand Council reached a unanimous conclusion. Humans were manageable. Manageable. That was the exact word Director Vrethok used. He said it at the podium with such magnificent certainty that the entire chamber applauded. I was there. I applauded too. I am not proud of this. Our logic was simple, really. Humans had weapons, yes, but so did every species that survived long. Enough to reach orbit. Humans had wars, yes, but their wars were clumsy, noisy, and short. Most importantly, their ambassador to the first contact proceedings was described in their own official documents as unarmed. One single human. No escort, no fleet, no weapons. Just one creature, approximately 1.8 meters tall, carrying what our scanners identified as a bag of dried leaves soaked in boiling water and a thin rectangular device they kept tapping with their fingers. His name, we were informed, was Doran Hale, species liaison. Former something called a Marine, though we had no idea what that meant at the time. We did not think to ask. This was our first mistake. Our second mistake was the seating. Arrangement Ambassador Keth of the Voran Dominion arrived first. The Voran are seven-limbed, telepathically linked, and extraordinarily dramatic. They filled half the room simply by existing. Their delegation numbered 43, all dressed in bioluminescent ceremonial plating. They hummed faintly. It was a power move, and an excellent one. Ambassador Seela of the Farron Collective arrived second, carried on a throne of engineered coral and attended by 12 drones. She had not walked in 3 centuries. She did not need to. The drones managed everything beautifully. Then Doran Hale walked in through the wrong door. Not the ceremonial entrance, not the diplomatic corridor. The maintenance access door, which, in his defense, was labeled in 17 languages. He pushed it open, looked around the enormous chamber filled with 200 representatives of spacefaring civilizations, and said, with the casual tone of a creature asking about public transit, "Hey, is this the first contact thing? My shuttle." Parked weird. Silence. Complete, absolute, crushing silence. Doran looked at the silence. He nodded at it, apparently satisfied, pulled out a chair at the negotiation table that was definitely not assigned to him, and sat down. He opened his bag, produced a metal container, poured himself a cup of that leaf water, took a long sip, closed his eyes briefly as if experiencing something spiritual, and then looked at all 200 of us and said, "Okay, so, who's in charge?" Here, I wrote in my report later that the room experienced a prolonged pause of diplomatic recalibration. What actually happened was that Ambassador Keth of the Voran started their ceremonial greeting speech, which was 17 minutes long and had been rehearsed for 6 years, and Doran Hale listened to approximately 40 seconds of it before raising one hand, a gesture that, according to our xenolinguistics team, humans use to indicate, "Please stop talking." Keth stopped talking, not because he wanted to. He stopped because he was so surprised that a creature had interrupted his 6-year rehearsal that his bioluminescent plating flickered off entirely, plunging his section of the room into darkness. "I appreciate that," Doran said, nodding politely. "Sounded very official, very nice, but let me save us all some time." He pulled out that rectangular device and laid it on the table. I have a list of things we want to talk about. I have a list of things you probably want to talk about, and I've got about 6 hours before my body clock tells me it's 2 in the morning and I get unreasonable. So let's go. Director Vrethok leaned toward me and whispered, "Is he negotiating?" "I believe," I whispered back. "He is doing something to us that does not yet have a name." I was correct. It did not have a name. Not yet. By hour 2, Doran Hale had renegotiated 3 trade agreements, politely but firmly refused 2 territorial offers by explaining that Earth wasn't really in the market for more land, and had somehow convinced Ambassador Seela to put her coral throne in the corner because, quote, "it's kind of blocking the whiteboard." Seela had not moved from her throne in 3 centuries. She moved the throne. I stared at my notes. My notes stared back at me. Neither of us had answers. By hour 3, I had stopped taking official notes and started writing a personal journal. My therapist will probably ask about this later. I will not have good answers. Doran Hale had, at this point, consumed 4 cups of his leaf water, eaten something from a crinkly wrapper that made an obscene amount of noise in a silent diplomatic chamber, offered the wrapper to Ambassador Keth out of what appeared to be genuine courtesy, and completely reorganized the seating chart using nothing but hand gestures, and the phrase, "You two seem like you'd get along. Just sit next to each other, trust me." The 2 species he had seated together were the Vorin Dominion and the Faran Collective. These 2 civilizations had been in a cold territorial dispute for 60 years. 60 years of frozen silence, diplomatic freezes, carefully worded insults dressed in polite language. They were now somehow sharing a bowl of something Doran had produced from his bag. He called it trail mix. He said it like the words explained everything. They explained nothing. And yet there was Ambassador Keth, 7 limbs wrapped politely around himself, eating a small piece of dried fruit and nodding thoughtfully at something Seela was saying. I looked at Director Vrethok. His left eye was twitching. "Vrethok," he said quietly, "send a message to the fleet." "Which message, Director?" He thought about it for a long time. "I don't know yet. Just have them ready." Ready for what? Neither of us could say. Because here was the problem with Doran Hale, the singular, unarmed, wrong-door entering human ambassador. The problem that none of our 17,000 reports had anticipated. He was not doing anything aggressive. He was not threatening. He was not performing the traditional dominance displays that every spacefaring species understood and respected. He was not even particularly loud. He was just, somehow, always right. When the Vorin representative argued that disputed Sector 9 belonged to them based on ancient stellar cartography, Doran pulled up something on his rectangular device and said, "Okay, but this map here shows the boundary shifted after the 4th Convergence Treaty, and also you guys signed this. See, that's your seal right there, the glowy one." And the Vorin looked at the glowy seal and could not argue with the glowy seal because it was, in fact, their seal. When 3 delegates from the Murathi Federation tried to table the human trade proposal for further review, Doran leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling for exactly 4 seconds and then said, "How about this? We move forward on the proposal, and in exchange, Earth will share agricultural preservation techniques with Murathi colony worlds. I read your crop yield reports from last cycle. You had a bad year. We can help with that." He said it simply, with no drama attached, no threat underneath it. Just a straightforward offer dressed in the awareness that he had done his reading. The Murathi delegation asked for a 10-minute recess. They came back in 7 minutes. They approved the proposal. Wrote in my personal journal, he prepared. The human prepared. While we spent 6 years rehearsing speeches, he read our reports. I underlined that 3 times. Now, here is where the story turns, and I need you to understand the sequence of events very carefully, because what happened next is the thing my director cannot talk about without developing a visible facial tic. At hour 5, a transmission arrived, unscheduled, unannounced, from a warship belonging to the Keth Alliance, a civilization that had deliberately not been invited to these proceedings because their idea of diplomacy involved orbital bombardment first and, apologies approximately never. The Keth transmission was simple. It stated that the Keth Alliance did not recognize the legitimacy of this summit. It stated that any agreements signed here were void. It stated that their fleet, currently positioned at the outer edge of the star system, would remain there as a reminder of Keth interest in the region. 200 representatives went very quiet. This was the kind of quiet that precedes a very long and very unpleasant new chapter in galactic history. I have read enough of those chapters to recognize the opening paragraph. Doran Hale looked at the transmission. He read it twice. He took a slow sip of his leaf water. Then he looked at me, specifically me, possibly because I was the one closest to him who appeared to still be functioning, and he said, "How many ships in their fleet?" 43 warships, I said. My voice was impressively steady. I was very surprised by this. Doran nodded. He picked up his rectangular device. He typed something. He put it back on the table. "Okay," he said. "I just messaged our people. Give it about 20 minutes. "Messaged your people," Director Pluvok repeated slowly. "Mr. Hale, you came here alone. You are an unarmed ambassador." Doran Hale looked at Director Pluvok with an expression that I have since spent considerable time studying in the security footage. It was not a threatening expression. It was not arrogant. It was patient in the way that a mountain is patient. He said, "Director, I said I was unarmed. I didn't say I was alone." 18 minutes later, a human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Our scanners counted the ships for a long time. They kept counting. They arrived at a number and then apparently doubted themselves and counted again. 91 vessels, each one larger than anything the Keth had in their 43. Each one running, according to our energy readings, weapons systems that our analysts had not encountered before, which is a sentence I genuinely never expected to write about a species we had classified as manageable. The Keth fleet did not fire. The Keth fleet, in fact, did something that in 60 years of monitoring them we had never once recorded. They turned around. All 43 ships, in complete silence, simply left. Doran Hale watched the sensor readings for a moment. He finished his leaf water. He set the cup down. "Cool," he said. "So, where were we?" And then he went back to the trade agreements. That evening, as the summit concluded and the most productive first contact proceedings in Convergence history were being quietly processed by people who were absolutely not emotionally prepared for them, I sat alone in the analysis room and looked at my 17,000 reports, every page, every observation, every confident conclusion. We had watched humans for 40 years and learned almost nothing useful. We had measured their weapons and missed the fact that their greatest instrument was the person across the table who had done more reading than anyone else in the room. We had counted their ships, but failed to ask why a species would send one man through the wrong door without fear, because a species only does that when the right door does not concern them. I wrote my final note of the evening. I wrote it carefully. I wrote it knowing it would be read by people with much higher security clearance than me, people who would then sit quietly in their chairs and make soft sounds. It said, "Recommend immediate reclassification. Humans are not manageable. Humans are, in fact, the ones doing the managing. We simply did not notice because they were polite about it." I submitted the report. Director Pluvok read it. He has not stopped twitching since. And somewhere, on a shuttle heading back to a planet called Earth, Doran Hale is probably drinking that leaf water, tapping that rectangular device, and preparing his notes for the next meeting. May whatever forces govern this galaxy have some form of mercy, because I am fairly certain the humans will not need any.